It began with a sound no living man in that camp had ever heard. Not thunder, not the roar of an army. It was the ground itself, tearing. Under a hard desert sky, in the dust of a wilderness that had already buried more of them than any of them wanted to count, a man named Korah stood with 250 leaders behind him and defiance in his mouth. Beside him stood Dathan and Abiram, who had refused even to come when they were called. They stood at the doors of their tents, their wives beside them, their children clinging to their legs, their little ones lifted in their arms, and they watched Moses with hatred in their eyes. And then Moses said, "If these men die an ordinary death, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the earth opens its mouth and swallows them alive, then you will know that these men have despised the Lord." He had barely finished speaking. The ground beneath their feet split, not a crack, a mouth. A long black seam ripped open through the middle of the camp, with a groan that came up out of the deep places of the earth, and the sand poured inward like water going down a drain, and the tents leaned, and the men who had been standing so proudly a heartbeat before were suddenly falling into the dark alive, their arms flung out, their faces turned up to a sky that was closing away from them. Dathan went down. Abiram went down. Their wives went down. Their children, their infants, their tents, their goods, everything they owned and everyone they loved, all of it slid living into the throat of the wilderness. And their screams, sharp and terrible, rose up out of the pit for one moment, and then the earth closed over them like lips. And there was silence, and where a household had stood, there was only smooth ground, as if they had never been born. And the people around them ran. All Israel that stood near them fled at the sound of their voices, for they cried, "The earth will swallow us too." They stumbled over one another. They trampled the sand. They fled from their own feet, because the ground had become a mouth, and no one knew where it would open next. Hold that moment. Hold the smooth sand where men had just been standing. Because to understand how a whole people came to the day, the earth swallowed them, how they came to hate the man who had led them out of slavery, how they came to be dying in a desert instead of living in a promised land, you have to go back before the pit, back to a mountain, back to a people freshly counted, freshly ordered, freshly filled with hope, standing at the foot of Sinai, only 11 days' journey from everything they had been promised. 11 days. That was all the distance that stood between them and the land. This generation would never walk it. Go back with me now to the beginning. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tent of meeting, on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt. And the word was this: "Take a census, count the whole congregation of the people of Israel, by their clans, by their fathers' houses, every male, head by head. Count all who are 20 years old and upward, all in Israel able to go to war." So they were counted. Man by man they came forward, and their names were written, and their numbers were set down, tribe by tribe. From Reuben, the firstborn, from Simeon, from Gad, from Judah, the largest of them, from Issachar and Zebulun, from the sons of Joseph, from Ephraim and from Manasseh, from Benjamin, from Dan and from Asher and from Naphtali. Tribe by tribe the totals rose until every fighting man in Israel had been reckoned. 603,550 men, an army standing in the sand, able to lift the sword. They did not yet know they were being counted for a war that almost none of them would live to fight. Only the tribe of Levi was not numbered among them. The Levites were set apart, not for the sword, but for the sanctuary. They were to carry the tabernacle, to guard it, to tend it, to take it down when the people moved and raise it again when the people stopped. And a warning was given. Any outsider who came near the holy things would die. The Levites were to camp around the tabernacle on every side, a living wall between the dwelling of God and the people, so that no wrath would fall on the congregation. Then the camp was given its shape, and it was a shape built around a center. At the heart of everything stood the tabernacle, the tent where the presence of God rested. Around it, close, camped the Levites. And around them, in a great square that faced outward to the four winds, camped the 12 tribes under their banners. On the east, toward the sunrise, camped Judah, and with him Issachar and Zebulun, the front of the march, the first to move. On the south camped Reuben, and with him Simeon and Gad. On the west camped Ephraim, and with him Manasseh and Benjamin. On the north camped Dan, and with him Asher and Naphtali. Each tribe under its own standard, each family by its own banner. Hundreds of thousands of tents spread across the desert floor in a vast and ordered square, and in the middle of it all, the tent of God, with the pillar of cloud standing over it by day. It was not a mob in the wilderness, it was an army encamped around its king, and the Levites themselves were divided by their work. The sons of Kohath carried the most holy things, the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars, but they could not touch them or even look at them uncovered, or they would die. The priests would wrap the holy things first, and only then would Kohath lift them onto their shoulders and carry them, for they bore them on their shoulders, and not on carts. The sons of Gershon carried the curtains and coverings, the tent and its hangings. The sons of Merari carried the frames, the bars, the pillars, the bases, the bones of the tabernacle, the heavy timber and bronze, and Aaron and his sons, the priests, oversaw them all. The firstborn of Israel had belonged to God ever since the night in Egypt, when the firstborn of the Egyptians died and the firstborn of Israel were spared. Now the Levites were taken in their place, life for life, and where the Levites fell short in number, the difference was paid in silver, redeemed man by man. Then came the laws, given while the camp still stood at Sinai, laws to keep the people clean, because the holy God was living in the middle of them. Anyone unclean was to be put outside the camp, so that they would not defile the place where God dwelt among them. If a man or woman wronged another and then confessed, they were to make full restitution and add a fifth to it. And there was a law for the bitterness that can grow in a marriage, a right for a husband gripped by jealousy, suspecting his wife of unfaithfulness, but with no witness and no proof. The woman would be brought before the priest, and she would drink water mixed with dust from the tabernacle floor, and by that water her guilt or her innocence would be shown. It was a strange and heavy thing, meant to take the matter out of a man's raging hands and place it in God's. And there was the vow of the Nazirite, the vow of a man or woman who wanted to set themselves apart to the Lord in a special way. For the days of the vow they would drink no wine, touch nothing from the vine. Let no razor come near their head so that their hair grew long and wild, and come near no dead body, not even a mother or a father. Their uncut hair was the sign of their consecration, worn openly for all to see. And then, breathed over the whole people, came a blessing, the words the priests were to speak over Israel, laying the name of God upon them like a hand upon the head. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So God would set his name on the people, and God himself would bless them. When the tabernacle was finished and set up and anointed, the leaders of the tribes came forward with their offerings, the heads of the 12 tribes, one each day for 12 days. And though the gift of each leader was the same as the gift before him, plate for plate and bowl for bowl and animal for animal, the account of them was written out in full, day after day, name after name, because in the sight of God, no single one of them was to be swallowed up in the crowd. Each tribe was seen, each leader was named. 12 days of gifts laid down before the altar, until the dedication was complete. The lamps were set in place on the golden lampstand, so that they gave light in front of it. The Levites were cleansed and presented before the Lord, waved before him like an offering, given wholly to the service of the tent. And a second Passover was kept, for there were men who had touched a dead body and could not keep the feast at its proper time, unclean as they were, and rather than shut them out forever, God made a way. They would keep it 1 month later, so that no one who longed to remember the night of deliverance would be left outside of it. And over all of it, over the whole camp, stood the cloud. By day it covered the tabernacle. By night it looked like fire. And whenever the cloud lifted from over the tent, Israel set out. And wherever the cloud came to rest, there Israel camped. As long as the cloud stayed, they stayed. A day, a month, a year, it did not matter. When it lifted, they moved. When it settled, they stopped. They did not decide their own steps. They followed the fire. 2 trumpets of hammered silver were made, and by their sound the whole camp was governed. 1 long blast, and the leaders gathered. 2 blasts, and the tribes set out. First the east, then the south, then the west, then the north. The silver called them to march, called them to war, called them to feast. The whole ocean of that camp moved and stopped at the sound of silver over the sand. And then the day came. In the 2nd year, in the 2nd month, on the 20th day of the month, the cloud lifted from over the tabernacle. It rose up off the tent and moved out ahead of them, out over the wilderness. And Israel set out for the first time from the mountain of God, tribe by tribe, banner by banner, the ark of the covenant going before them to seek out a resting place. And as the ark set out, Moses would say, "Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you." And when it rested, he would say, "Return, O Lord, to the 10,000 thousands of Israel." They were moving. After a year at the mountain, they were finally moving toward the land. The hope of it must have been almost unbearable. The dust rising under 1,000,000 feet, the trumpets ringing, the cloud out ahead of them like a promise you could see. 11 days of journey. That was all that stood between them and everything. It did not take 11 days for it to begin to fall apart. It took only 3 days out from the mountain before the people began to complain. And the complaint was bitter in the ears of the Lord, and when he heard it, fire broke out among them and burned at the edges of the camp, licking through the outer tents. The people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed, and the fire sank down and died. And they called that place Taberah, the burning, because the fire of the Lord had burned among them. But the fire had only touched the outside. The real trouble was inside. There was a mixed crowd among them, and they began to crave. And their craving spread through the whole camp like a sickness, and the people of Israel wept. And their weeping had a shape, and the shape was a memory of Egypt. "We remember the fish we ate in Egypt for nothing," they said, "the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. But now our strength is dried up. There is nothing at all. Nothing but this manna to look at. The manna, the bread from heaven. It fell every morning with the dew, fine as frost, like coriander seed, pale like resin. They gathered it, ground it, boiled it, baked it into cakes, and it tasted like something made with fresh oil. It was a miracle lying on the ground at their feet every single morning of their lives, and they wept over it, because it was not meat, and it was not Egypt. And Moses heard them, weeping throughout their families, every man at the door of his tent. And something in him broke. He turned to God and poured out the bitterness of a man carrying a weight too great for one back. "Why have you dealt so badly with your servant?" he said. "Why have you laid the burden of all this people on me? Did I give birth to them? Where am I to get meat to give to all these people? I am not able to carry them alone. The burden is too heavy. If this is how you will treat me, then kill me now if I have found favor in your sight, and let me not see my wretchedness." And God did 2 things. First, he gave Moses help. "Gather 70 elders," he said, "men you know to be leaders, and I will take some of the spirit that is on you and put it on them, and they will bear the burden with you, so that you do not bear it alone." And it happened. The 70 stood around the tent, and the Spirit rested on them, and they prophesied. 2 of them, Eldad and Medad, had stayed back in the camp, and the Spirit came on them there too, and they prophesied among the tents. A young man ran to Moses to report it, and Joshua, Moses' assistant, said, "My Lord, stop them." But Moses only said, "Are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his Spirit on them all." And second, God gave them meat. "You want meat," he said. "You will have meat, not for 1 day or 2 or 5 or 10 or 20, a whole month until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected the Lord who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, 'Why did we ever leave Egypt?' And a wind went out from the Lord, and drove quail in from the sea, and they fell all around the camp, a day's journey on this side, and a day's journey on that side, piled 2 cubits deep on the face of the ground. And the people rose up all that day and all night, and all the next day, and gathered the quail, and the least anyone gathered was more than a man could carry. But while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was even chewed, the anger of the Lord blazed against them, and he struck them with a very great plague. And they buried there the people who had craved, and they called that place Kibroth-Hattaavah, the graves of craving. because there they buried the ones whose hunger had turned into their grave. Graves in the sand, the first of many, and even those closest to Moses turned against him. His own sister Miriam and his own brother Aaron spoke against him because of the Cushite woman he had married. "Has the Lord only spoken through Moses?" they said. "Has he not spoken through us also?" And the Lord heard it. Now Moses was a very meek man, more than anyone on the face of the earth, and he said nothing in his own defense. But the Lord came down in the pillar of cloud and called the three of them out. And he said, "When there is a prophet among you, I make myself known to him in visions and dreams. But not so with my servant Moses. With him I speak mouth to mouth clearly, and he beholds the form of the Lord. How then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" And the cloud lifted from over the tent, and there stood Miriam, white as snow, leprous. Aaron looked at her, and his heart failed him, and he begged Moses, "Do not punish us for the sin we so foolishly committed. Let her not be as one dead." And Moses cried out to God, "O God, please heal her." And the Lord said, "If her father had spit in her face, would she not bear her shame 7 days? Let her be shut outside the camp for 7 days, and then let her be brought in again." So Miriam was shut outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not set out until she was brought in again. The whole nation waited on the shame of one woman. And then they came to the edge of everything. They came to the wilderness of Paran, to the very border of the land. And the Lord told Moses to send men to spy out the land of Canaan, 1 leader from each tribe, 12 men, chiefs among the people. And they went. Among them was Caleb of the tribe of Judah, and Hoshea son of Nun of the tribe of Ephraim, whom Moses called Joshua. "Go up into the land," Moses told them. "See what it is like. See whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. See whether the land is good or bad, whether the cities are open camps or fortresses. Be bold. Bring back some of the fruit." So the 12 went up. They walked the length of the land, from the southern desert up into the hills, all the way to the far north. They saw its cities and its valleys. And in the valley of Eshcol, they cut down a single cluster of grapes, so heavy that they slung it on a pole, and 2 men carried it between them, staggering under the weight of it, and pomegranates and figs besides. For 40 days they explored the land, and then they came back. And they came back carrying the fruit, and carrying fear. They stood before Moses and Aaron and all the congregation, and they held up the impossible grapes, and they said, "It is true. The land flows with milk and honey. This is its fruit." And then they said the word that changed everything. However, the people who live there are strong. The cities are fortified and very great. And we saw the descendants of Anak there, the Amalekites in the south, the Hittites and Jebusites and Amorites in the hills, the Canaanites by the sea and along the river, giants, men of enormous size. And Caleb quieted the people and said, "Let us go up at once and take it, for we are well able to overcome it." But the other 10 cut him off. "We are not able to go up against these people," they said, "for they are stronger than we are." And they spread a bad report through the whole camp, and the report grew as it spread, and by the end it had become a monster. The land devours its people. The men there are of great height. We saw the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them, grasshoppers. That was the word that broke the nation, and all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. All that night, hundreds of thousands of them weeping in the dark, and their weeping turned into rage. They grumbled against Moses and Aaron. "Would that we had died in Egypt," they said. "Would that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become plunder." And they said to one another, "Let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt, back to Egypt, back to slavery." They stood 11 days from the promise, and they turned around to crawl back to their chains. Moses and Aaron fell on their faces. Joshua and Caleb tore their clothes and pleaded with the people. "The land is exceedingly good," they cried. "If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us in. Do not rebel against the Lord. Do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is gone from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." And the whole congregation answered them by reaching for stones. They meant to stone them where they stood. And the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting before all the people. And God said to Moses, "How long will this people despise me? How long will they refuse to believe in me after all the signs I have done among them? I will strike them with pestilence and start again with you." And Moses stood in the gap. He argued with God for the people who had just tried to kill his friends. "If you kill this people as one man," he said, "then the nations who have heard of your name will say, 'The Lord was not able to bring this people into the land, so he slaughtered them in the wilderness.'" And then Moses reached for the very words God had spoken about himself. "The Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression. Please pardon the iniquity of this people according to your steadfast love, just as you have forgiven them from Egypt until now." And the Lord said, "I have pardoned according to your word." But there would be a cost, and the cost was a whole generation. "None of the men who have seen my glory and my signs," God said, "and yet have tested me these 10 times and have not obeyed my voice, none of them shall see the land. Not one of that grumbling generation, 20 years old and upward, would enter it. They would die, everyone, in the wilderness. Only Caleb, who followed fully, and Joshua would go in. And their children, the little ones they said would become plunder, those children would enter the land their fathers had refused. 40 years. For every one of the 40 days the spies had walked the land, Israel would wander a year. 40 years, until the last of that generation lay dead in the sand. "Your dead bodies shall fall in this wilderness," God said, "and here your wandering shall carry your faithlessness." The 10 spies who had spread the bad report were struck down by a plague and died before the Lord that same day. Only Joshua and Caleb of the 12 remained alive. And when Moses told the people the sentence, they mourned greatly. And then, in the morning, they did the worst thing yet. They changed their minds in the wrong direction. "Now we will go up," they said. "Now we will fight. We have sinned, but now we are ready." And Moses said, "Do not go up, for the Lord is not among you. You will fall by the sword." But they would not listen. They pushed up into the high country to fight, and the Ark of the Covenant did not go with them, and Moses did not go with them. And the Amalekites and Canaanites came down and struck them and beat them back all the way to Hormah. Yesterday they would not fight when God was with them. Today they fought when he was not, and they were crushed. So the 40 years began, the turning back into the desert, the long dying. And in the desert, the laws still came. Laws for a people who would one day, finally, live in the land. Laws about the offerings they would bring there, laws that opened the door for the foreigner living among them to worship the same God. And there was a Sabbath broken, a man found gathering wood on the day of rest, and by the command of the Lord he was put outside the camp and stoned, because the holiness of the day was not a small thing. And a command was given to make tassels on the corners of their garments with a cord of blue, so that whenever they looked down at their own clothing, they would remember the commandments and not follow after their own hearts and their own eyes, which had already led them so far astray. And it was into this long, grinding desert, this camp of the condemned wandering out its sentence, that the rebellion of Korah rose up. Now you know where the pit came from. Korah was a Levite, a Kohathite, one of those chosen to carry the holiest things of God on his own shoulders, and it was not enough for him. He took Dathan and Abiram and On, of the tribe of Reuben, and 250 leaders of the congregation, men of renown, and they rose up against Moses. "You have gone too far," they said. "All the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" And Moses fell on his face. Then he stood, and he answered Korah, "In the morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy. Take censers, all of you, and put fire and incense in them, and stand before the Lord. And the one the Lord chooses shall be the Holy One." And to Korah the Levite he said the sharpest word, "Is it too small a thing for you that God has brought you near to himself to do the service of the tabernacle, and you seek the priesthood also?" He called for Dathan and Abiram. They refused to come. "We will not come up," they sneered. "Is it a small thing that you have brought us out of a land flowing with milk and honey?" And they meant Egypt. They called Egypt the land of milk and honey now. They had turned the whole world upside down. to kill us in this wilderness? Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up." And Moses was very angry. The next morning they came, Korah and all his company, each with his censer, fire and incense burning, 250 of them, and Korah at their head. And they stood at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and Korah gathered the whole congregation against Moses and Aaron. And the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. And God said, "Stand apart from this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." And Moses and Aaron fell on their faces and cried, "O God, shall one man sin, and you be angry with all the congregation?" And the Lord told Moses, "Tell the people to move back, away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram." So the people drew back. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the doors of their tents, with their wives and their sons and their little ones. And Moses said the words that hung the whole rebellion on a single sign: "If these men die a natural death, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord makes the ground open its mouth and swallow them, and everything that is theirs, and they go down alive into the pit, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord." And as soon as he finished speaking, the ground split apart under them. You have already seen it, the mouth in the earth, the falling, the screams cut off, the sand closing smooth over a whole household as if they had never lived. Korah, Dathan, Abiram, their families, their tents, everything, gone down alive into the deep, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. And fire came out from the Lord, and consumed the 250 men who were offering the incense. In one breath, the leaders of the rebellion, the men of renown, were ash. And God commanded that the bronze censers of the dead men, for they had been made holy, offered before the Lord even in rebellion, be gathered out of the fire, and hammered flat into a covering for the altar. A permanent skin of bronze over the place of sacrifice, made from the firepans of men the earth had swallowed, so that no one who was not of the line of Aaron would ever again dare to come and burn incense before the Lord, and not become like Korah. You would think that would end it. The very next day the whole congregation grumbled against Moses and Aaron. "You have killed the people of the Lord," they said, as if the earth had opened at Moses' whim. And the glory of the Lord appeared, and a plague broke out and began to run through the camp like fire, killing as it went. And Moses said to Aaron, "Quickly, take your censer, put fire on it from the altar and incense, and run to the congregation, and make atonement for them, for wrath has gone out." And Aaron ran, an old man, the high priest, running into the middle of a plague with a censer in his hands, and he stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stopped. It stopped at the line where he stood, behind him the dead, before him the living. 14,700 lay dead, besides those who had died in the matter of Korah. And Aaron stood there in the ash and the silence, holding back death with a handful of smoke. To settle forever who was chosen, God gave a quiet, strange sign. "Take 12 staffs," he said, "one for each tribe with the name of each leader written on it, and Aaron's name on the staff of Levi, and leave them overnight before the ark. The staff of the man I choose will sprout." So the 12 dead sticks were laid up before the Lord. And in the morning the staff of Aaron had not only sprouted, it had budded, it had blossomed, and it had borne ripe almonds, a dead branch overnight, heavy with fruit. And it was kept before the ark as a sign against the rebels, that their grumbling might end, and they might not die. The duties of the priests and Levites were set again in place, their portions given, the tithe of Israel assigned to them, because they would have no land of their own. The Lord himself was their inheritance. And there was a law given for the deepest uncleanness of all, the uncleanness of death. A red heifer without blemish, never yoked, was to be slaughtered and burned entirely, and its ashes kept and mixed with water, and this water of cleansing sprinkled on anyone who had touched a corpse or entered a tent where someone had died. For death clung to the living, and only that water could wash it off, so that a person did not carry the grave into the presence of God. And the years wore on. The generation kept dying. They came at last to Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin, and there Miriam died, and there she was buried, the sister who had watched over Moses in the reeds of the Nile when he was a baby, the prophetess who had sung on the far shore of the sea when Pharaoh's chariot sank, buried in the sand like the rest, and there was no water. And the people gathered against Moses and Aaron, the old complaint back again in a new generation's mouth. Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to this evil place? There is no grain, no figs, no vines, no pomegranates, and no water to drink." Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the tent, and the glory of the Lord appeared, and God said, "Take the staff, gather the people, and speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will give water." And Moses took the staff, and he gathered the people before the rock. And something in him, after 40 years of their grumbling, after Miriam freshly buried, after a lifetime of carrying this stubborn people, something broke. "Hear now, you rebels," he shouted. "Shall we bring water for you out of this rock?" And he lifted his hand and struck the rock with his staff, twice, and water gushed out, abundant, and the people drank and their animals drank. But God had said, "Speak." Moses struck. God had said, "The rock." Moses said, "We," as if the water were his to give. And in that moment, in his anger, he failed to treat God as holy in the eyes of the people. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not believe in me to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them." Moses, the man who had spoken with God face to face, the man who had stood in the gap and turned away God's wrath again and again. He too would die outside the land. He would lead them to its very edge, and he would not cross over. The waters were called Meribah, the waters of quarreling. They asked the king of Edom to let them pass through his land along the road, promising to touch nothing to buy their water. And Edom refused and came out against them with a heavy force, and Israel turned away and went around. There was no clear road anywhere. Only the long way, always the long way. And they came to Mount Hor on the edge of Edom, and there the second grave was dug for one of the great ones. Aaron, the high priest, the brother who had stood between the dead and the living, was going to die. And God told Moses to bring Aaron and his son Eleazar up the mountain, and there on the height, in front of the whole people gathered below, Moses stripped the priestly garments off of Aaron and put them on Eleazar his son, the robe, the breastpiece, the turban passing from father to son on a bare mountaintop. And Aaron died there, on the top of the mountain, and Moses and Eleazar came down without him. And when all the congregation saw that Aaron had died, the whole house of Israel wept for him 30 days. The generation that came out of Egypt was almost gone now, one by one the great ones and the small ones, falling into the sand. The king of Arad, a Canaanite, heard they were coming and attacked, and took some of them captive. And Israel vowed to the Lord and fought back, and destroyed his cities. And then, on the hard road around Edom, the people grew impatient again. The same impatience, the same words. "Why have you brought us up to die in the wilderness? There is no food, no water, and we loathe this worthless bread. The manna again, the bread from heaven, hated again." And the Lord sent fiery serpents among them, and they bit the people, and many of the people of Israel died. And the people came to Moses and said, "We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray that he take the serpents away." And Moses prayed. And God gave a strange remedy. "Make a serpent of bronze and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten when he looks at it shall live." So Moses made a bronze serpent and lifted it up on a pole, and it happened just so. A man bitten by a snake, dying in the sand, would turn his eyes and look at the bronze serpent lifted up, and he would live. Not by medicine. By looking, nothing more than turning his dying eyes toward the bronze lifted up above him. And they moved on camp by camp, and the old songs began again. The singers remembered the book of the wars of the Lord, and at a place where God gave them water they sang, "Spring up, O well, sing to it," the well that the leaders dug. Small joys in a long journey. And then the tide of the whole thing began at last to turn. Sihon, king of the Amorites, ruled the land they needed to cross. And Israel sent word, "Let us pass through, we will keep to the road. We will not turn into your fields or vineyards." And Sihon would not let them pass. He gathered his whole army and came out against Israel in the wilderness to Jahaz and fought. And Israel struck him with the edge of the sword and took his land from the Arnon to the Jabbok and lived in his cities, in Heshbon and all around it. And Og, king of Bashan, came out against them too, with all his people, to battle at Edrei. And the Lord said, "Do not fear him, for I have given him into your hand." And Israel struck him down, and his sons and all his people, until not one was left. and they took possession of his land as well. 2 kings, 2 armies, 2 kingdoms taken. The people who had once wept that they were grasshoppers were now conquerors, camped on land they had won with the sword, and the new generation was beginning to believe. And this is where a king across the river began to be afraid. Balak, the king of Moab, watched Israel come and camp in the plains across from his land, a nation spread out like a stain across the country, having just crushed the Amorites, and he was in dread of them. He said, "This horde will lick up everything around us the way an ox licks up the grass," and Moab was in fear. So he sent for a man named Balaam, the son of Beor, who lived far away at Pethor by the great river, a man with a reputation, a man whose blessings blessed and whose curses stuck. "Come," Balak's messengers said, "and curse this people for me, for they are too mighty. Curse them, so I can drive them out." And Balaam said, "Stay the night, and I will tell you what the Lord says to me." And God came to Balaam and said, "You shall not go with them. You shall not curse this people, for they are blessed." So Balaam sent the messengers away. But Balak sent again, more princes, more honored than the first, with a promise of great reward. And Balaam said, "Though Balak gave me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord. But stay tonight, and let me see." And this time God said, "If the men have come to call you, rise and go with them, but only the word that I tell you shall you speak." So Balaam saddled his donkey in the morning and went. And the anger of God was kindled because he went. And the angel of the Lord took his stand in the road with a drawn sword in his hand to oppose him. Balaam did not see it, but the donkey saw it. And the donkey turned aside out of the road into a field, and Balaam struck her to turn her back. Then the angel stood in a narrow place between 2 walls in a vineyard. And the donkey, seeing the sword, pressed against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot, and he struck her again. Then the angel stood in a place so narrow there was no room to turn at all, and the donkey lay down flat under Balaam, and Balaam's anger blazed, and he beat her with his staff. And the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she spoke. "What have I done to you," she said, "that you have struck me these 3 times? And Balaam, a man so blind with rage that he answered a talking animal as if it were nothing strange, said, "Because you have made a fool of me. If I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now." And the donkey said, "Am I not your own donkey that you have ridden all your life? Have I ever done this to you before?" And he said, "No." Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel standing in the road with the drawn sword, and he bowed his head and fell on his face. And the angel said, "Why have you struck your donkey 3 times? I came out to oppose you." The donkey saw me and turned away 3 times. If she had not turned, I would have killed you by now and let her live. 3 times the donkey had seen the angel. 3 times the man had seen nothing at all. And so Balaam came to Balak, and Balak took him up to the high places to look down on the camp of Israel, so that from there he might curse them. 7 altars were built, 7 bulls and 7 rams offered. And Balaam opened his mouth to curse, and blessing came out instead. "How can I curse whom God has not cursed?" he said. "Look, a people dwelling alone. Who can count the dust of Jacob? Let me die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his." Balak was furious. "I brought you to curse my enemies, and you have blessed them. Come to another place," he said, "where you can see only part of them. Maybe there. 7 more altars, 7 more sacrifices." And again the blessing poured out. God is not a man that he should lie. He has blessed, and I cannot reverse it. There is no enchantment against Jacob, no divination against Israel. A 3rd time Balak dragged him to a new height, and this time Balaam did not even try his omens. He looked out over Israel, camped tribe by tribe below him, and the Spirit of God came upon him, and he lifted up his oracle. "How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel, like valleys spread out, like gardens beside a river. Blessed are those who bless you, and cursed are those who curse you." Balak struck his hands together in rage. "Go home," he shouted. "I meant to reward you, and the Lord has kept you from it." But before he left, Balaam gave one more oracle, and it reached far into the future. "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel." And he saw the nations round about, one by one, and their ends. Then Balaam rose and went back to his own place, and Balak went his way. The curse for hire had failed. Not one word against Israel could be forced out of the prophet's mouth. But what an enemy could not do from a mountaintop with curses, Israel did to itself in the valley. While they camped at Shittim, the men of Israel began to go to the women of Moab, and the women invited them to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods, and Israel yoked itself to the Baal of Peor. The very people no curse could touch bowed down to another god of their own free will. And the anger of the Lord blazed, and a plague broke out among them. And in the middle of it, in the middle of a nation weeping at the door of the tent of meeting while the plague ate through the camp, a man of Israel named Zimri, the son of a leader of the tribe of Simeon, brought a Midianite woman named Cosbi, a daughter of one of the chiefs of Midian, right past Moses and all the congregation, brazenly, into his tent, in full view of everyone who was mourning. And Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron, saw it, and he rose up from the assembly and took a spear in his hand, and followed the man into the tent, and drove the spear through the two of them, Zimri and Cosbi both. And the plague was stopped. But 24,000 had already died. And God said that Phinehas, by his zeal, had turned back the wrath, and he gave him a covenant of peace, a lasting priesthood for him and his descendants, because he had stood for the honor of God in the middle of the nation's shame. And now, found with that last plague, the old generation was finished. The men who had left Egypt, who had wept at the report of the giants, who had said, "Let us go back," were dead. Every one. The 40 years had done their work. The sand was full of their graves. So it was time to count again, a second census. Take a census of all the congregation, 20 years old and upward, all able to go to war. And they were counted, tribe by tribe, a new army, the sons of the ones who had fallen, 601,730 men. And among all of them, there was not one man who had been counted in the first census in the wilderness of Sinai, not one, for the Lord had said they would die in the wilderness. And they had. Not one was left of them, except Caleb and Joshua. 2 men. Out of a whole nation. 2 men had believed, and 2 men remained. And this new people, counted at the edge of the land, would receive it by lot, tribe by tribe, family by family. And in that new census, a question came up that had never been asked. A man named Zelophehad had died in the wilderness. He had not been part of Korah's rebellion. He had died in his own sin like all the rest, and he had left no sons, only daughters. 5 of them, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And these 5 women came and stood before Moses and Eleazar, and the leaders and the whole congregation, at the door of the tent of meeting, and they said, "Our father died in the wilderness, and he had no sons. Why should our father's name be taken away from his clan just because he had no son? Give us a possession among our father's brothers." And Moses brought their case before the Lord. And the Lord said, "The daughters of Zelophehad are right. You shall give them a possession, an inheritance among their father's brothers." And it became a law in Israel, if a man dies and has no son, his inheritance passes to his daughter. 5 women in a camp of hundreds of thousands had asked for justice, and the law of the nation bent to make room for them. And then the Lord told Moses to go up a mountain and look at the land he would not enter. "Go up and see it," God said, "and then you will be gathered to your people as Aaron your brother was gathered, because you rebelled against my word at the waters of Meribah." And Moses, standing under his own sentence, thought not of himself, but of the people. "Let the Lord appoint a man over the congregation," he said, "who will go out before them and come in before them, so that the people of the Lord will not be as sheep without a shepherd." And the Lord said, "Take Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Set him before Eleazar the priest and all the congregation, and commission him in their sight, and put some of your authority on him, so that all the people will obey him." And Moses did it. He brought Joshua forward and laid his hands on him before them all and commissioned him. The one who had stood at Moses' side since the mountain, who had brought back the faithful report from Canaan, he would be the one to lead them across. And the desert laws kept coming, the ordering of a life that was finally about to begin in a land, the daily offerings morning and evening, and the offerings for the Sabbath, for the new moons, for the Passover, for the Feast of Weeks when the first fruits came in, for the Day of Trumpets, for the great Day of Atonement when the nation would afflict itself and be cleansed, for the Feast of Booths in the fall. A whole year of worship laid out, a calendar for a people who would soon have fields and harvests and homes, and laws about vows, that when a person binds himself with a promise to the Lord, he must not break his word, and rules for when a father or a husband might confirm or annul the vow of a daughter or a wife. Then came the reckoning with Midian. The Midianite women had led Israel into the sin at Peor, on the counsel of Balaam, and God told Moses to carry out vengeance on Midian, and then to be gathered to his people. So 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 armed men, went out to war, with Phinehas the priest and the holy vessels and the trumpets. And they killed the kings of Midian, 5 of them, and among the slain they killed Balaam the son of Beor also. The prophet who could not curse Israel from the mountain had sold them away to destroy themselves, and now he fell by the sword among the very people he had tried to corrupt. And the army took the spoil and the plunder and the captives and brought them back. And Moses was angry when he saw that they had spared the Midianite women, for these were the very women who had drawn Israel into sin at Peor, and had brought the plague on the congregation of the Lord. And the grim work of judgment was carried out, and the soldiers who had killed were kept outside the camp 7 days and purified with the water of cleansing, they and their captives and everything they had touched, before they could come back in. And the vast spoil was divided, half to the soldiers and half to the congregation, with a portion set aside for the Lord and for the Levites. And the officers of the army came to Moses and said that when they had counted their men, not one was missing. Not one soldier had been lost in the battle. And they brought the gold they had taken, the armlets and bracelets and rings and beads, as an offering before the Lord in gratitude for their lives. And now on the very threshold, a shadow of the old rebellion rose one last time. The tribes of Reuben and Gad had very great herds of livestock, and they looked at the land east of the Jordan, the land of Jazer and Gilead that they had just conquered from Sihon and Og, and saw that it was good for cattle. And they came to Moses and said, "Do not make us cross the Jordan. Give us this land on this side." And Moses heard in their words the echo of the worst day in the wilderness. "Shall your brothers go to war while you sit here?" he said. "Why will you discourage the heart of the people from going over into the land? This is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh to see the land. They turned away the hearts of the people, and the Lord's anger was kindled, and a whole generation died in the wilderness. And now you rise in your father's place to bring even more anger on Israel. If you turn away from following him, he will abandon this people in the wilderness again, and it will be on your heads." And they came near and answered him, "No, we will not go home first. We will build folds for our sheep and cities for our little ones here, and then we ourselves will arm and cross over at the head of the army, and we will not return to our homes until every one of the tribes of Israel has received his inheritance. We will not come back until the land is theirs." And Moses agreed, but bound it with a warning. "If you do this, if you cross armed before the Lord for the war, then when the land is subdued you may return, and you will be free of obligation. But if you do not do this, behold, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out." And they swore to it, "Your servants will do as you command." And the land east of the Jordan was given to Reuben and Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh. And Moses wrote down the whole journey, every stage of it, from the day they marched out of Ramesses in Egypt with a high hand, out of every place they had camped, all the way through the wilderness to where they now stood, in the plains of Moab by the Jordan. Every stopping place named, every grave-strewn stretch of desert set down in order, the whole long map of 40 years from the house of slavery to the edge of the promise. A record of everywhere they had been, so no one would ever forget how far they had come, and how long and at what cost. And God gave the command for what lay ahead. "When you cross over into Canaan, drive out the inhabitants before you, destroy their idols and their high places, and take possession of the land, for I have given it to you. Divide it by lot among your tribes. But if you do not drive them out, then those you let remain will be as thorns in your eyes and barbs in your sides, and they will trouble you in the land where you live. And what I plan to do to them, I will do to you. And the borders of the land were drawn, the whole shape of it, from the southern desert to the great sea in the west, up the coast, along the northern hills, down the eastern side to the Jordan and the Salt Sea. A real land, with edges, waiting. And the men were named who would divide it, Eleazar the priest and Joshua, and one leader from each tribe. The men who would parcel out the promise to the children of the ones who had thrown it away. And the Levites, who would receive no territory of their own, were given cities to live in throughout the land. 48 cities with their pasture lands scattered among all the tribes, and among those 6 were set apart as cities of refuge, 3 on each side of the Jordan, so that a person who killed someone by accident, without hatred, without intending it, could flee there and be safe from the avenger of blood until he could stand trial. For the deliberate murderer there would be no shelter. The murderer would die. But for the one whose hand had struck without malice, the city of refuge stood open, so that innocent blood and guilty blood would not be treated the same, and the land itself would not be defiled by unavenged death. And there was one last matter, and fittingly it was the daughters of Zelophehad again. The heads of their clan came with a worry. If these 5 women, who had been granted their father's inheritance, married men from other tribes, their land would pass out of their own tribe and into another, and the balance of the inheritance would be broken. And Moses, by the word of the Lord, gave the ruling, the daughters of Zelophehad may marry whom they wish, but only within their own tribe, so that no inheritance shall pass from tribe to tribe, and each keeps the land of its fathers. And the 5 sisters did as they were commanded, and married within their father's clan, and their inheritance stayed where it belonged. These are the commandments and the rules that the Lord commanded through Moses to the people of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. And there they were, camped in the plains of Moab on the eastern bank, the river running between them and everything they had been promised. On the far side, the hills of Canaan rose up in the haze, and somewhere beyond them stood the walls of Jericho. The land was right there, close enough to see, close enough to smell the green of it on the wind coming off the water. The ones who had come out of Egypt were gone. Every grumbler, every doubter, every man who had wept at the word of the giants and turned his face back toward Egypt, all of them lay behind, buried in the sand along the whole length of that long map, from Sinai to here. Miriam under the stones at Kadesh, Aaron on the top of his mountain, and Moses still standing, still leading but under his own sentence, a man who had brought a people to the edge of a land he would never enter. But the children were alive. The little ones their fathers had said would become plunder in the wilderness. They were standing now, counted, armed, on the bank of the river. A new generation with new leaders, with Joshua at their head, and the promise still ahead of them and unspent. The tents stretched out along the Jordan. The cloud stood over the tabernacle in the middle of them, and across the water the land waited exactly where it had always been, exactly 11 days and 40 years away. They had not crossed yet. The river was still between them, and there, at the edge of the water, with the whole desert behind them and the whole promise in front of them, the people of God sat down and waited for the word to go over.